The war had been going on for 80 years. 80 long, terrible years. In the Calvex sector, 3 great alien civilizations were locked in combat. They fought over planets, over trade routes, over resources. But mostly they fought because they had been fighting for so long that nobody remembered how to stop. The Thorian Confederacy controlled the eastern side of the sector. They were insect-like beings with hard shells and multiple arms. Their soldiers were born to fight, bred in massive hives that could produce millions of warriors. The Thorians had numbers on their side. For every ship they lost, 2 more would take its place. Their fleets darkened the space between stars. On the western side sat the Velk Empire. The Velk were reptilian, cold-blooded, and calculating. They didn't have as many ships as the Thorians, but what they had was better. Velk shields could take hits that would destroy other vessels. Their tactics were perfect, honed over thousands of years of military tradition. When Velk fleets moved, they moved like a single organism, precise and deadly. The Quinn Collective held the southern regions. They were the strangest of the 3. The Quinn were crystalline beings, their bodies made of living mineral that pulsed with inner light. But the truly strange thing about them was their minds. Every Quinn was connected to every other Quinn. They shared thoughts, memories, experiences. When one Quinn learned something, they all learned it. When Quinn ships fought, they fought with perfect coordination because they were, in a sense, one massive mind split across millions of bodies. The war had started small. A trade disagreement. Some Thorian merchants claimed the Velk had cheated them. The Velk said the Thorians were lying. Sanctions were imposed. Ships were seized. Then someone fired the first shot. That was 80 years ago. Now entire star systems lay dead. Planets that once held billions were empty. Their surfaces scorched by weapons that could crack worlds open like eggs. Space was filled with debris from 10,000 battles. Old hulls drifted in the dark, coffins for the crews that had died inside them. The 3 powers were perfectly balanced. When the Thorians pushed forward, the Velk shields held them back. When the Velk advanced, the Quinn weapons cut them down. When the Quinn attacked, Thorian numbers overwhelmed them. Round and round it went, year after year, death after death. Nobody could win. Nobody would surrender. The Galactic Council watched from afar and did nothing. The Council was made up of dozens of spacefaring species, ancient civilizations that had learned long ago that some wars had to burn themselves out. They sent humanitarian aid when they could. They brokered temporary ceasefires that never lasted. But they didn't intervene. The Calvex sector was a bleeding wound, and the Council had accepted that some wounds couldn't be healed. On the Thorian colony world of Kethrix 7, 40 million civilians tried to live normal lives in the middle of hell. They farmed the land. They raised their young. They tried not to think about the fleets that clashed in the space above their planet every few months. But this time was different. This time, both the Velk and the Quinn had decided that Kethrix 7 was strategically important. The planet sat at a junction of 3 major hyperspace lanes. Control it and you could move fleets faster across the sector. Both empires wanted it badly. The Thorian defense fleet fought hard. They held the orbital space for 3 weeks, their ships forming a protective shell around the planet. But slowly, inevitably, they were pushed back. The Velk came from the north with their unbreakable shields. The Quinn came from the south with their devastating energy weapons. The Thorian ships fought and died, buying time for the civilians below. Matriarch Zelves commanded the Thorian forces from her flagship, the Hive's Wrath. She was old for a Thorian, her carapace scarred from a dozen battles. She had fought in this war for 40 years. She had seen friends die. She had ordered soldiers to their deaths. She was tired of killing. She was tired of watching her people die. On the 21st day of the battle, her tactical officer brought her the numbers. They weren't good. Matriarch, we've lost 60% of our fleet. The Velk are pressing from grid north 7. The Quinn are breaking through our south flank. We can't hold both sides. Zelves looked at the tactical display. Red icons showed enemy ships. Blue icons showed her own forces, far too few of them. And in the center, the green marker that represented Kethrix 7 and its 40 million souls. How long until they can evacuate? She asked. 6 hours, Matriarch. We have transport ships ready. But they can't launch while the battle is this close to the planet. They'd be destroyed before they cleared orbit. 6 hours. She needed to hold the enemy back for 6 more hours. She looked at her fleet, at the exhausted crews, at the damaged ships held together with emergency patches and hope. She couldn't do it. Not with what she had left. For the first time in 40 years of service, Matriarch Zelves made a choice that felt like surrender. She opened a communication channel that she had never used before. A channel that connected to the Galactic Council. More specifically, to the Council's newest member. Humanity had joined the Council only 12 years ago. The Thorians had voted against their admission. So had the Velk. So had most of the established powers. Humans were primitives, newcomers barely able to travel between stars. They had only recently developed faster-than-light travel. They had no great fleets. Their technology was generations behind the galactic standard, but the Council had rules. Any species that developed FTL and asked to join could be admitted if they followed the Council laws. Humans followed the laws. They were careful, polite, eager to learn. They opened trade. They shared their culture. They asked a million questions about everything. The older species tolerated them the way adults tolerate curious children. Zelves didn't expect much from the humans. But the Council Charter was clear. All member species had to respond to humanitarian requests. It was one of the fundamental laws that held the Council together. If you called for help to save civilians, someone had to answer. The transmission took 3 minutes to reach the nearest human outpost. Another 2 minutes for them to respond. When the answer came, it was in decent Thorian standard, spoken with a strange accent. "This is Rear Admiral Chen Wei of the Terran Defense Fleet. We received your distress call, Matriarch. We're 40 hours away at maximum FTL speed. What's the situation?" Zelves explained quickly. 40 million civilians, 6 hours needed to evacuate. 2 enemy fleets pressing the attack. A defense force that was almost gone. There was a pause. Then Admiral Chen spoke again, her voice calm and professional. "Understood, Matriarch. We'll be there. Hold as long as you can." Chen out, that was it. No promises. No grand declarations. Just, "We'll be there." Zelves felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not hope exactly, but maybe possibility. Her tactical officer looked at her with concern. "Matriarch, forgive me, but the humans, they've been in space for barely a decade. They have small ships, primitive weapons. What can they possibly do against 1,000 Velk and Quinn warships?" Zelves didn't have an answer. She returned her attention to the battle, to the desperate fight to buy just a few more hours. In Earth's home system, 40 light-years from the Calvex sector, Admiral Chen Wei stood on the bridge of the TDS Indomitable, humanity's first and only carrier-class warship. Around her, the crew worked with quiet efficiency, preparing for emergency FTL. Chen was 53 years old, with silver threading through her black hair. She had joined Earth's Navy 30 years ago, back when humanity's greatest achievement was a small station on Mars. She had commanded Earth's defense fleet for 5 years now, ever since humanity had been granted Council membership. It had been a quiet 5 years. Patrol routes, trade escort, meeting with alien dignitaries who looked at humans like interesting pets. No combat, no real challenges. Until now. "Status report," Chen said. Her executive officer, Commander James Morrison, read from his display. "All ships report ready for FTL. We have the Indomitable, 3 destroyers and 2 frigates. Total complement 6 ships. Fighter wings are loaded and ready. 147 craft total." Chen nodded. 6 ships, against an alien fleet of nearly 3,000 vessels, against weapons that could destroy planets, against shields that could shrug off nuclear weapons. It should have been suicide. By every logical calculation, it was suicide. But Chen had spent the last 2 hours reading everything humanity's intelligence services had on the Calvex sector war. She had watched battle recordings. She had studied tactical analyses. She had seen 80 years of combat between 3 advanced civilizations. And she had noticed something interesting. "Lieutenant Commander Okonkwo," Chen said, turning to her tactical officer. "You've reviewed the battle data. Tell me what you see." Sarah Okonkwo was 31, brilliant and the best tactical mind in the human fleet. She had been reviewing the Calvex recording since the distress call came in. "They fight like it's a game, ma'am," Okonkwo said. "Formal formations. Predictable maneuvers. They line up their ships, they fire their weapons, they hold their positions. It's like watching ancient naval battles, all broadsides and honor." Chen smiled. "Exactly. They're fighting the way nations fight when warfare becomes institutionalized. When military academies teach the proper way to do battle. When there are rules and traditions." Morrison frowned. "And that's bad for them?" It is if they're up against someone who doesn't follow the rules, Chen said. She pulled up a display showing Earth's own military history. Centuries of warfare, thousands of conflicts, wars fought in every possible way, from massive set-piece battles to guerrilla actions to urban combat to cyber warfare. Wars where there were no rules, where survival was the only goal, where any tactic that worked was valid. Humanity spent 10,000 years learning how to kill each other, Chen said quietly. We tried every possible way to wage war. We made mistakes. We learned from them. We developed doctrines written in blood. And then finally we stopped fighting ourselves because we realized we were too good at it. We almost destroyed our own planet 3 times. She looked at her crew. The Galactic Council thinks we're primitives because our technology isn't as advanced. But technology doesn't win wars. Tactics win wars. Strategy wins wars. The willingness to do whatever it takes wins wars. Okonkov caught on quickly. You're saying they've forgotten how to really fight. I'm saying they fight with honor. We fight to win. Chen's expression hardened. And right now, 40 million civilians need us to win in 6 hours. She turned to Morrison. Sound battle stations. All hands prepare for combat FTL exit. Deploy all fighters the moment we arrive. Doctrine Omega is in effect. Morrison paled slightly. Doctrine Omega was humanity's no-holds-barred combat protocol. Everything was permitted. Every trick, every unconventional tactic, every piece of strategic ruthlessness that humanity had developed over millennia of warfare. It was the doctrine you used when you absolutely had to win, no matter the cost. Aye, ma'am, Morrison said. Doctrine Omega. May God help them. Chen pulled up the tactical display showing the Calvex sector. 3 massive fleets, thousands of ships, 80 years of institutional warfare. We're not there to help them, Commander, Chen said softly. We're there to help the Thorian civilians. As for the fleets, and she smiled without humor, they're about to get a lesson in how Earth does warfare. The Indomitable and its escort fleet jumped to FTL, racing toward a battle that had raged for 80 years. A battle that humanity was about to end in 60 seconds. Behind them, Earth's high command watched nervously. They had sent their best ship and their best admiral into impossible odds. 6 vessels against thousands. By every reasonable calculation, Chen Wei and her fleet were flying to their deaths. But humanity had stopped making reasonable calculations about warfare a long time ago. Somewhere in the dark between stars, racing at faster-than-light speeds toward the Calvex sector, Admiral Chen Wei sat in her command chair and reviewed the plan one more time. It was brutal. It was ruthless. It was probably going to get some of her people killed. But it would work. It had to work. Because 40 million people were counting on it. The journey to the Calvex sector took 40 hours. 40 hours of traveling through the strange space between spaces, where normal physics didn't quite apply, and the universe folded in on itself to let ships cross distances that should have taken years. On the TDS Indomitable, those 40 hours were not spent resting. Admiral Chen had ordered every department to prepare for combat. But this wasn't the normal kind of preparation. This wasn't checking weapons and running drills. This was something different. This was studying the enemy. In the carrier's main briefing room, Chen gathered her senior officers. The room was designed to hold 30 people, but today only 12 were present. 12 people who would be making decisions that would affect millions of lives. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Okonkwo stood at the front, a holographic display floating in front of her. The display showed the Calvex sector battle zone, updated in real time from long-range sensor drones that the Council had deployed to monitor the conflict. This is what we're walking into, Okonkwo said, her voice clear and professional. The display zoomed in, showing thousands of small icons representing ships. Current count: 847 Thorian vessels, 923 Velk ships, and 1,104 Quinn craft. Commander Morrison whistled low. 2,800 ships, and we're bringing 6. Closer to 3,000 by the time we arrive, Okonkwo corrected. Both the Velk and Quinn are bringing in reinforcements. They want that planet badly. Chen studied the display. Show me their formations. The hologram shifted, pulling back to show the overall tactical picture. The Thorian ships formed a defensive sphere around Kethric 7, but it was a sphere with holes in it. The Velk fleet approached from galactic north in a wedge formation, their strongest shields at the front. The Quinn came from the south in a broad line, Their ships spaced evenly. They're very organized, Captain Rodriguez from the destroyer Defiance observed. Beautiful formations, actually. Like watching a ballet. That's the problem, Chen said. They're too organized. Okonkov, show them the battle recordings from 3 weeks ago. The display changed, showing actual footage of combat between the three fleets. Ships lined up facing each other. Energy weapons lashed out in brilliant streams of light. Shields flared as they absorbed impacts. Ships exploded when their shields failed, blooming like deadly flowers in the darkness of space. It looked impressive. It looked powerful, but Chen saw something else. Notice anything strange? She asked her officers. They watched for a minute. Then Captain Yuki Tanaka from the frigate Apollo spoke up. They're not moving much. I mean, they're adjusting position, but they're not maneuvering. Not really. Exactly, Chen said. They fight from fixed positions. They establish formations and hold them. It's like old wet Navy combat from Earth before we had missiles and submarines. Ships of the line, trading broadsides. Okonkwo pulled up another display. It makes sense for their technology. The Velk shields work best when ships overlap their fields. They get stronger together, so they stay in tight formation. The Quinn consciousness sharing works better when they're close, so they group up too. The Thorians rely on numbers and covering fire, so they cluster. And clustering makes them predictable, Chen said. Tactical. Bring up the debris field analysis. Okonkwo pressed a control and the display shifted again. This time it showed something that made several officers lean forward in surprise. Between the fleets, filling the space where most of the fighting had happened, was a massive cloud of wreckage. Destroyed ships, broken pieces of hull, dead engines, shattered weapons. 80 years of war had left a graveyard in space. How much material are we looking at? Chen asked. Conservative estimate, 40,000 destroyed vessels. That's full ships, not counting the debris from partial destructions. In terms of total mass, Okonkwo did a quick calculation. Roughly 16 billion tons of metal, composite materials, and other substances all floating in a rough sphere about 200,000 kilometers across. Morrison shook his head in disbelief. They've been fighting in the middle of a debris field? For 80 years? Haven't they figured out that's dangerous? Why would they? Chen asked. The debris isn't moving fast. It's just floating there. Their shields can handle impacts from slow-moving objects. To them, it's like fighting in a junkyard. Messy, but not threatening. She smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. To us, it's ammunition. The officers looked at each other. Chen could see understanding dawning on their faces. You want to weaponize the debris, Rodriguez said slowly. I want to turn their graveyard into our weapon, Chen corrected. Okonkwo, explain the kinetic strike package. Okonkwo pulled up another display showing technical specifications. Human destroyers are equipped with kinetic penetrator rounds. Simple tungsten rods, 40 centimeters wide, 2 meters long. We accelerate them using magnetic rails to 0.15 C. 0.15 C, Tanaka repeated. 15% the speed of light. Exactly. At that velocity, it doesn't matter how good your shields are. You can't dissipate that much kinetic energy. The math doesn't work. The rod punches straight through. Okonkwo highlighted the debris field. Now imagine what happens if we don't shoot the rods at ships. Imagine we shoot them at debris. Understanding rippled through the room. Each impact would turn debris into shrapnel, Morrison said. And at relativistic speeds, that shrapnel would tear through anything in its path. The debris is already spread throughout the battle zone, Rodriguez added. We wouldn't have to aim at individual ships. We'd just have to hit enough debris and let physics do the rest. Chen nodded. That's phase 1. Phase 2 involves our fighter wings. Show them the mine deployment pattern, tactical. Okonkwo brought up a simulation. It showed human fighters scattered across the battle zone in what looked like random patterns, but Chen knew it wasn't random at all. Each fighter would be precisely positioned in 3-dimensional space, part of a larger network. Each fighter carries 20 mine packages, Okonkwo explained. These aren't traditional mines. They're small fusion warheads with basic maneuvering capability and friend or foe identification. Once deployed, they drift with minimal thrust, positioning themselves throughout the battle space. When activated, they all detonate simultaneously. How much damage are we talking? Asked Commander Sarah Kim from the destroyer Tempest. Each mine is roughly equivalent to a 5-kiloton nuclear device, Okonkwo said. We'd be deploying approximately 3,000 mines, all detonating at once, in a space filled with tightly clustered enemy ships. The room was silent for a moment. That's, Morrison started, then stopped. That's brutal. That's total warfare, Chen said flatly. This is what humanity learned how to do over 10,000 years of killing each other. We learned that honor is nice, but survival is better. We learned that the enemy who fights fair is the enemy who loses. She looked at each of her officers in turn. I know this seems harsh. I know it seems wrong. These aliens have been fighting for 80 years, but they've been fighting with rules, with traditions, with a concept of honorable combat. She pulled up an image of Kethric 7 showing the Thorian colony world. But 40 million civilians don't care about honor. They care about living. And we're going to make sure they do. Captain Rodriguez spoke carefully. Admiral, what about after? When the council sees what we've done? When they realize we don't fight like they do? Then they'll learn an important lesson, Chen said. They'll learn that humanity came to the stars hoping never to use the things we learned on Earth. But we brought those lessons with us just in case. She paused. This is the just in case. The briefing continued for another 3 hours. Chen went over every detail of the plan. Every ship had specific assignments. Every pilot knew their role. Every contingency had a backup plan. When they were done, Chen dismissed everyone except Okonkwo. You disagree with this, Chen said. It wasn't a question. Okonkwo considered her words carefully. I think it'll work, ma'am. The math checks out. The tactics are sound. We'll accomplish the mission. But we're going to kill a lot of people in 60 seconds. Okonkwo met her admiral's eyes. Ships don't just have weapons and engines. They have crews, people, individuals with families and hopes and dreams. We're going to end thousands of lives in 1 minute. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Yes, we are. And that's going to stay with us for the rest of our lives. Every decision I make in that minute, I'll remember. Every person who dies because I gave an order, I'll carry that. She turned to face her tactical officer directly. But here's what I know. If we don't do this, 40 million Thorian civilians die. If we don't do this, this war continues for another 80 years and billions more die in the fighting. If we don't do this, the galaxy continues to believe that the way they fight is the only way to fight, and more wars like this one break out. So we become the monsters? Okonkwo asked quietly. So we become the people willing to do monstrous things for the right reasons, Chen corrected. There's a difference. Monsters enjoy the killing. We don't. But we do it anyway because someone has to. Okonkwo was silent, processing this. If you want to transfer to a non-combat position, I'll approve it right now, Chen said. No questions asked. No mark on your record. I need you for this mission, but I won't force you to carry this weight if you can't. Okonkwo thought about it. Really thought about it. Then she shook her head. No, ma'am. I'm with you. If someone has to carry this weight, better it's people who understand what it means. Chen smiled sadly. Then let's go save 40 million people. The final hours before arrival were spent in preparation. Fighter pilots ran simulations. Weapons crews checked their systems obsessively. The destroyers loaded their kinetic penetrators. The frigates prepared for their high-speed run. In her quarters, Chen wrote letters. One for each member of her crew, to be delivered if she didn't make it back. She had written similar letters before every combat deployment in her career, but this time felt different. This time she was almost certain some of her people wouldn't come home. The Mercury and Apollo, the 2 frigates, had the most dangerous assignment. They would dive through the Quinn formation at maximum speed, disrupting their carefully organized line and driving them into the minefield. The odds of both ships surviving were low. Chen had personally talked to both captains. Both had volunteered. Both understood they were probably flying to their deaths. That was the other thing humans had learned over millennia of warfare. Sometimes survival wasn't the goal. Sometimes you just had to complete the mission. 6 hours before arrival, Chen stood on the observation deck of the Indomitable, looking out at the strange colors of FTL space. Commander Morrison joined her. The crew is ready, he said. As ready as they can be anyway. Are we doing the right thing, James? Chen asked. Morrison considered the question. I think we're doing the necessary thing. Whether it's right, I guess we'll find out. History will judge us. History always does. But history isn't the one making the call right now. You are. And for what it's worth, I trust your judgment. Chen appreciated that. Thank you. They stood in silence for a while, watching the colors swirl past. Do you think it'll really work? Morrison asked. Ending the battle in 60 seconds? It has to, Chen said. We're only going to get one chance. If we try conventional combat, we lose. We're outnumbered 500 to 1. Our only advantage is surprise and unconventional tactics. We hit hard, we hit fast, and we disappear before they can respond. And if it doesn't work, then we buy as much time as we can for those civilians to evacuate, and we hope someone writes a nice memorial for us. Morrison laughed, despite the grim topic. You always did have a way with words, Admiral. The final hour approached. Chen returned to the bridge and took her command chair. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency. Nobody spoke unless necessary. The tension was thick enough to cut. All ships report ready, Morrison said. Fighter wings prepared for launch, reported the flight deck officer. Weapons hot, said the weapons officer. Tactical solutions loaded, Okonkwo added. Chen took a deep breath. Then let's go introduce the galaxy to human warfare. Helm, bring us out of FTL at the designated coordinates. All ships, combat formation on my mark. Aye, ma'am. FTL exit in 60 seconds. Chen pulled up the tactical display one more time. 3,000 enemy ships, 6 human vessels, 1 minute to change everything. This is Admiral Chen Wei to all ships, she said, her voice broadcasting to every member of the fleet. In 60 seconds, we're going to do something that nobody expects. We're going to end an 80-year war in 1 minute. Not because we want to be heroes. Not because we want glory, but because 40 million people need us to. She paused. Remember your training. Follow your assignments. Trust your crewmates. And most importantly, remember why we're here. We're here because someone called for help and humanity answered. That's what we do. That's who we are. FTL exit in 10 seconds, the helm officer announced. All hands battle stations, Chen ordered. Prepare for combat operations. The countdown reached 0. The human fleet dropped out of FTL space and into hell. The sensors on the bridge of the Indomitable screamed to life the moment they dropped out of FTL. 3,000 ships, maybe more. The display showed the Calvec sector battle in all its terrible glory. The Thorian defensive fleet, battered and desperate, formed a broken shell around their colony world. The Velk Empire pressed from the north with their organized wedge formation, shields overlapping like scales on a dragon. The Quinn Collective attacked from the south, their crystalline ships glowing with deadly energy. And in the middle of it all, floating like ghosts in a graveyard, were the remains of 80 years of warfare. Broken ships, shattered hulls, the corpses of thousands of vessels that had died in this cursed sector. Position confirmed, the helm officer reported. We're exactly where we need to be, on the edge of the engagement zone. Chen studied the tactical display. The human fleet had emerged at the outer boundary of the battle, far enough that the fighting hadn't reached them yet. But that would change in seconds. Already sensors from all 3 fleets were detecting the new arrivals. Open a wideband channel, Chen ordered. All frequencies. I want everyone to hear this. Channel open, Admiral. Chen spoke clearly and calmly, her voice carrying across space to 3,000 alien warships. This is Admiral Chen Wei of the Terran Defense Fleet, acting under Galactic Council humanitarian protocols. You are ordered to cease fire and allow civilian evacuation. You have 30 seconds to comply. For a moment there was silence. Then the responses started coming in. The Thorian matriarch responded first, her voice filled with desperate hope. Admiral Chen, thank the stars. We need at least 6 hours to complete evacuation. Can you? She was cut off by the Velk commander. His voice was cold, reptilian, and filled with contempt. Humans, you brought 6 ships to a battle of thousands? This is not your concern, primitives. Stand aside or be destroyed along with the Thorians. The Quinn response came as a chorus of voices, thousands of individuals speaking with one mind. The humans are irrelevant. Ketheric 7 must fall. The trade routes must be secured. You cannot stop the inevitable. Chen listened to all 3 responses. Then she closed the channel to the Thorians, keeping only the link to the Velk and Quinn open. I gave you 30 seconds, Chen said, her voice hard as steel. That time is up. You've chosen to continue this battle very well. Let me show you how humanity wages war. She cut the channel and turned to her bridge crew. Ladies and gentlemen, weapons free. Execute Doctrine Omega. The bridge erupted into controlled chaos as every station began working at once. Fighter wings, launch all craft, Chen ordered. The Indomitable's launch bays opened like the jaws of a great beast. Fighters poured out in a swarm that looked nothing like the organized squadrons the aliens were used to. Human fighters didn't launch in neat formations. They launched tactically, each craft following a pre-programmed vector that would take them exactly where they needed to be. 147 fighters. 8 seconds from first launch to last. They scattered across the battlefield like angry hornets moving in 3 dimensions simultaneously. On the Velk flagship, Commander Sarvix watched the fighter launch with confusion. What are they doing? There's no organization to that, no formation at all. His tactical officer studied the scan data. Commander, each fighter is following a completely independent flight path, but they're coordinated somehow. It's like they're part of a pattern we can't see yet. Sarvix dismissed it. 147 small craft against 3,000 capital ships. Madness. Continue the assault on the Thorian position. But then, the human destroyers opened fire. The Defiance, Resolute, and Tempest had moved into firing position the moment they dropped from FTL. Their main weapons weren't laser batteries or plasma cannons like the aliens used. They were railguns, magnetic accelerators that could launch solid projectiles at enormous speeds. The tungsten rods screamed out from the destroyers at 15% of light speed. They crossed the distance to the debris field in less than a second. They didn't hit ships. They hit wreckage. A destroyed Velk cruiser, dead for 20 years, was struck by the first penetrator. The rod punched through the hull like it wasn't there and came out the other side. The impact transferred massive kinetic energy into the wreck. The dead ship exploded, not from any remaining fuel or weapons, but simply from the force of impact. The explosion sent pieces of the ship flying in all directions. Those pieces were now moving at dangerous speeds. And there were more pieces of wreckage all around them. The human destroyers fired again, and again, and again. Within 15 seconds, they had struck 30 pieces of large debris. Each impact created an expanding cloud of high-velocity shrapnel. The clouds overlapped. They merged. They turned the center of the battlefield into a storm of metal moving at killing speeds. The Velk ships, packed tight in their formation for maximum shield efficiency, had nowhere to go. The first pieces of shrapnel hit the Velk wedge formation at the 20-second mark. Their shields flared, trying to dissipate the impacts. But these weren't slow-moving pieces of floating junk. This was debris moving at incredible velocity, with all the kinetic energy that implied. A chunk of armor plating the size of a car hit a Velk destroyer's shield at 10,000 kilometers per second. The shield failed. The plating continued through the ship's hull, through its interior and out the other side. The destroyer vented atmosphere and began to spin out of control, and it wasn't alone. Across the Velk formation, ships were being hit. Shields were collapsing. Hulls were breaching. Evasive maneuvers. Commander Sarvix screamed. Break formation. Break formation now. But breaking formation meant their shields would stop overlapping. It meant each ship would be vulnerable on its own. And the Velk had trained for 80 years to fight in formation. The change didn't come quickly enough. On the other side of the battlefield, the Quinn Collective was having its own problems. The human frigates Mercury and Apollo had begun their attack run at the 25-second mark. They didn't fire weapons. They didn't slow down. They simply accelerated to maximum speed and dove straight into the Quinn formation. It was insane. It was suicidal. The Quinn ships filled space with energy weapons, trying to destroy the frigates before they could get close. The Mercury was hit multiple times. Its forward shield collapsed. Then its hull was breached. But the ship's momentum carried it forward, straight through the center of the Quinn line. The Quinn ships were forced to scatter. They couldn't maintain their organized formation with a human warship, flying through them at maximum combat speed. The crystalline vessels moved apart, trying to avoid collision, which pushed them directly into the area where the human fighters had been seeding mines. Captain Rodriguez, commanding the Mercury, watched her ship die around her. Hull breaches on 3 decks. Engine room gone. Life support failing. But she had made it through the Quinn formation. The Apollo was still intact, completing its own run. All hands abandon ship, Rodriguez ordered calmly. Repeat all hands to escape pods. It's been an honor serving with you. She stayed at her post as her crew evacuated, keeping the ship on course for just a few more seconds, just long enough to complete the mission. The Mercury exploded at the 40-second mark. 23 crew members died with their captain. But they had done their job. The Quinn formation was broken. The mines activated, 3,000 fusion warheads, each one small but deadly, had been drifting throughout the battle space. The human fighters had placed them with mathematical precision over the last 30 seconds. Now synchronized by the tactical computers on the Indomitable, they all detonated at once. The Quinn fleet, clustered close together so they could share consciousness across their ships, found themselves in the center of a nuclear firestorm. Crystalline hulls, beautiful and strong, shattered under the fusion blasts. The Quinn shared mines screamed in agony as hundreds of ships died at once. Individual Quinn by the millions linked together, experienced death simultaneously, but Chen wasn't done. At the 50-second mark, she ordered the Indomitable to fire its main batteries. But again, she didn't target ships. She aimed at the atmosphere of Kethric 7. The carrier's plasma lances reached down through space and superheated a section of the upper atmosphere directly above the planet's major continent. The air literally began to boil. A massive thermal plume rose from the planet, a tower of heat and light that could be seen across the system. Every sensor on every ship in the battle zone was suddenly blinded by the heat signature. Targeting systems failed. Long-range scans became useless. The entire center of the battlefield became a confusion of thermal noise and electromagnetic interference. In that confusion, at the 58-second mark, 3,000 mines all detonated. The synchronized detonations created a cascade effect. Ships near the mines were destroyed instantly. Ships farther away had their shields collapse from the overlapping blasts. And in the center of it all, the debris field that the human destroyers had turned into a weapon continued to tear through anything in its path. The Velk fleet, proud and organized, lost 647 ships in those final seconds. Their formations shattered. Their ships scattered. Those that survived were damaged, shields down, weapons offline. The Quinn fleet fared worse. 891 crystalline vessels were destroyed. The shared consciousness was traumatized by the sudden loss of so many individuals. The surviving ships stopped fighting entirely, their crews overwhelmed by the psychic backlash of mass death. Even the Thorian fleet took losses. Matriarch Zelves had received a coded transmission from Admiral Chen exactly 3 seconds before the main assault. The message was simple: scatter, now. The Thorians broke their defensive formation and dispersed as much as they could in 3 seconds. It saved thousands of lives, but they still lost 203 ships to the shrapnel storm and the mine detonations. At exactly the 60-second mark, the battle ended. Not because everyone was dead, not because one side had won, but because Admiral Chen Wei opened a channel and spoke into the sudden silence. The evacuation corridor is now open. You have 6 hours. Any ship that fires a weapon will be destroyed. Are we clear? Nobody responded. Nobody dared. On the Velk flagship, Commander Sarvik stared at his tactical display in shock. 647 ships gone. In 1 minute. His formation was destroyed. His fleet was crippled, and the humans still had all 6 ships operational. On the Quinn command vessel, the collective struggled to process what had happened. So many minds lost, so much death all at once. They couldn't fight. They could barely think. On the Thorian flagship, Matriarch Zelves looked at her sensors and felt something she hadn't felt in 40 years of warfare. Fear. Not fear of her enemies. Fear of her allies. The humans had just done something that 3 advanced civilizations, fighting for 80 years, had never managed. They had ended a major battle in 60 seconds. Without superior technology, without overwhelming numbers, they had done it with tactics that no council species had used in thousands of years. Brutal, ruthless, efficient tactics that treated space warfare not as an honorable duel, but as a problem to be solved. And they had solved it. Admiral Chen sat in her command chair watching the tactical display. The 3 fleets were in chaos. Ships drifted without direction. The mines had all been used. The debris field was settling. The thermal bloom from the planet was fading. It was over. Status report, she said quietly. Commander Morrison read the numbers, his voice shaking slightly. 1 frigate destroyed. The Mercury is gone with all hands. 23 crew lost. The Apollo is heavily damaged but intact. 14 fighters destroyed. 14 pilots lost. All other ships operational but need repairs. 37 dead. 37 people who had followed Chen's orders into battle and never came home. Chen felt the weight of each death settle on her shoulders. She would carry them for the rest of her life. Open a channel to the Thorian matriarch, Chen ordered. The channel opened. Matriarch Zelvis appeared on the screen, her compound eyes wide. "The corridor is clear, Matriarch," Chen said. "Begin your evacuation. We'll maintain position and ensure no one interferes." "Admiral Chen," Zelvis struggled to find words. "What? What did you just do?" Chen's expression was hard. "I completed my mission. 40 million civilians need to evacuate. They have 6 hours. Nothing else matters." She cut the channel and turned to her crew. "Maintain combat readiness. If anyone so much as powers up a weapon, I want to know about it immediately." The bridge crew worked in silence. Around the Indomitable, the human fleet held position, 5 ships and 133 fighters, standing guard over a corridor of peace in the middle of a war zone. And throughout the Calvec sector, on 3,000 ships belonging to 3 great civilizations, people were starting to understand something important. Humanity had just introduced the galaxy to something it had forgotten existed. Real warfare. Total warfare. Warfare without rules or honor or tradition. Warfare where the only goal was to win. And humanity had won in 60 seconds. The evacuation began 20 minutes after the battle ended. Thorian transport ships rose from Kethric 7 by the hundreds. Massive vessels designed to carry thousands of civilians each. They filled with refugees from the cities below. Parents with their children. The elderly, the sick. Anyone who could walk or be carried made their way to the transports. Admiral Chen watched from the bridge of the Indomitable. The human fleet maintained its position at the edge of the evacuation corridor, weapons armed and ready. But there was no need to fire. Nobody challenged them. Nobody even came close. The 3 alien fleets had pulled back. They were regrouping, counting their losses, trying to understand what had happened. Commander Morrison approached Chen with a data pad. "Preliminary damage assessment is complete, Admiral. The numbers are significant." Chen took the pad and read. Velk Empire, 647 ships destroyed, 218 severely damaged. Quinn Collective, 891 ships lost, 307 damaged beyond combat capability. Thorian Confederacy, 203 vessels destroyed, 97 damaged, over 1,700 ships out of action, more than half the total fleet strength that had been in the sector. In 60 seconds. "What about us?" Chen asked. "The Mercury is gone. The Apollo needs 6 months of repairs. We lost 14 fighters. Total casualties, 37 dead, 62 wounded." Morrison paused. "We accomplished the mission with less than 1% casualties." The numbers should have felt like a victory. They weren't. Each casualty was a person, someone with a family, with dreams, with a life that had ended because Chen gave an order. "Make sure every family gets a personal message from me," Chen said, "and I want to visit each one in person when we get back to Earth." "Yes, ma'am." Chen returned her attention to the evacuation. The transports continued to rise from the planet. 3 hours had passed. They were halfway done. On the Thorian flagship Hive's Wrath, Matriarch Zelvis sat in her command chamber with her senior tactical advisors. They had been reviewing the battle data for 2 hours. "Play it again," she ordered. The holographic display showed the 60 seconds of combat from the Thorian perspective. Her advisors had broken it down moment by moment, analyzing every human action. "They didn't fight a battle," her chief tactician said. His voice held a mixture of awe and horror. "They executed an operation. Every action was calculated for maximum effect. Every shot had a purpose." Another advisor spoke up. "The humans studied us. They knew how we would respond. They knew the Velk would stay in formation. They knew the Quinn would cluster together. They exploited our strengths as weaknesses." "The debris field," Zelvis said. "We've been fighting in that graveyard for 80 years. We never thought to weaponize it. Because it never occurred to us, Matriarch. In proper warfare, you target enemy vessels. You don't turn the battlefield itself into a weapon. It's," he struggled for the word, "uncivilized." Zelvis made a clicking sound that indicated dark amusement. "And yet it worked. In 1 minute, they accomplished what we haven't managed in 80 years. They ended the battle." She pulled up another display, this one showing human military history. Earth's conflicts. Wars that had lasted years, decades, even centuries. Billions of humans killing each other with every weapon imaginable. "Look at this," she said to her advisors. "This is their history. They fought wars of extinction against themselves. They developed weapons that could destroy their entire planet. They learned every possible way to kill." She paused, and then they stopped. They unified. They came to the stars hoping to never use those lessons again. But they brought the lessons with them, the chief tactician said. Yes, they did. Zelves looked at the evacuation data. 4 hours complete now. Almost done. We called for help and they answered. They could have refused. They could have come and fought conventionally and died. Instead, they came and won. She made her decision. Open a channel to Admiral Chen. The human admiral appeared on the screen. She looked tired. Zelves wondered if humans felt the weight of death the same way Thorians did. Matriarch, Chen said with a respectful nod. Admiral, the evacuation is nearly complete. 40 million of my people will live because of your actions. I want you to know that the Thorian Confederacy will not forget this debt. Chen's expression softened slightly. You don't owe us anything, Matriarch. We answered a humanitarian call. That's what council members do, is it? Zelves asked. The council has ignored this sector for 80 years. They sent humanitarian aid but never intervened. You intervened. You stopped the battle. We did what was necessary. Zelves studied the human carefully. I have reviewed your military history, Admiral. I know what your species is capable of. You showed remarkable restraint today. You could have destroyed all 3 fleets completely. That wasn't the mission, Chen said simply. The mission was to open an evacuation corridor. We did exactly that using the minimum force necessary. Minimum force. Zelves clicked in dark amusement again. You destroyed over 1,700 ships. And spared the other 1,300. We could have killed them all. Chen's voice was hard. We chose not to. That's the difference between us and what we could be. The channel closed. Zelves sat back in her command chair thinking about those words. Humans were warriors who chose peace. That made them more dangerous than warriors who only knew war. On the Velk flagship Pride of the Empire, Commander Sarvix was having a very different conversation. This is unacceptable, he roared at his staff. We are the Velk Empire. We have the finest military tradition in the galaxy, and we were humiliated by primitives. His chief weapons officer spoke carefully. Commander, with respect, they are not primitives. Their tactics were sophisticated. Brutal, but sophisticated. Sarvix slammed his clawed hand on the console. They cheated. They used the debris field as a weapon. They sent ships on suicide runs. They violated every principle of honorable combat. Perhaps, his tactical officer said. But they won. In 60 seconds, they achieved what should have been impossible. Sarvix wanted to argue, but he couldn't. The data was clear. The human fleet had executed a perfect attack. Every element had worked together. Every ship had played its role. And the Velk formation, perfect by every military standard, had been torn apart. Pull up their military history, he ordered. The display showed conflicts from Earth, wars that made Sarvix's blood run cold. Weapons of mass destruction used on civilian populations, entire cities burned, tactics that ignored every concept of honor. His tactical officer pointed to one particular conflict. This one is called World War II. 60 million humans died. They fought in every environment imaginable. They developed tactics for urban warfare, submarine warfare, aerial bombardment, amphibious assault. They learned how to fight in ways we abandoned thousands of years ago. Why would they fight like that? Sarvix asked. Without honor? Without rules? Because they were fighting for survival. When species fight wars of extinction, honor becomes a luxury they can't afford. Sarvix stared at the data, at the casualty counts, at the weapons, at the sheer brutality of human warfare. They're not fighting for extinction now, he said. They're part of the Council. They've joined galactic civilization. Yes, Commander. But they remember. They know how to fight without rules. And today they showed us what that means. Sarvix dismissed his staff and sat alone in his command chamber. His fleet was crippled. His formation was broken. His pride was shattered. But worse than all of that was the knowledge that the humans had held back. They could have done so much worse. Admiral Chen had said it herself, minimum force necessary. If this was minimum force, what did maximum force look like? For the first time in his long military career, Commander Sarvix felt fear of an enemy. The Quinn Collective's response was different from both the Thorians and the Velk. The Quinn shared a collective consciousness. When one Quinn experienced something, they all experienced it. When one Quinn died, they all felt the loss. 891 ships meant millions of individual Quinn, all dying at once. All connected. all sharing their death with the rest of the collective. It had nearly broken them. In the aftermath, the collective struggled to process what had happened. Individual Quinn minds argued with each other in the shared consciousness. Some wanted revenge, some wanted to withdraw completely, some wanted to understand. Gradually, a consensus formed. The collective decided to analyze the human attack from every angle. They reviewed the tactical data. They studied human history. They examined every decision Admiral Chen had made. And slowly they began to understand. The humans had identified the Quinn's fundamental weakness. The collective shared consciousness worked best when Quinn ships stayed close together. So the humans had driven them together, then detonated fusion weapons in their midst. The humans had known this would cause maximum casualties. They had planned for it. They had executed it perfectly. It was the most precise application of violence the Quinn had ever witnessed. In their shared consciousness, the collective reached a conclusion. The humans were not simply warriors. They were something more dangerous. They were problem solvers who used warfare as a tool. When the Quinn encountered a problem, they thought about it collectively and found a solution through consensus. When humans encountered a problem, they studied it, identified weaknesses, and exploited those weaknesses with ruthless efficiency. The collective made a decision. They would not fight humans, ever. The cost was too high. 6 hours after the battle, the last transport rose from Kethric 7. 40 million Thorian civilians saved. Admiral Chen received the confirmation and allowed herself to feel relief. The mission was complete. They had done it. "Prepare for FTL jump," she ordered. "We're going home." "Admiral," Commander Morrison said, "we're receiving communication requests from all 3 fleets. They want to talk about what happened." "Tell them to contact Earth through official channels," Chen said. "We're not diplomats. We're a military fleet and our mission is complete." The human ships formed up and jumped to FTL, leaving the Calvec sector behind. But the news of what had happened traveled faster than light. Within hours, the Galactic Council knew about the Battle of Kethric 7. Within days, every major civilization had reviewed the tactical data. Within weeks, the battle was being taught in every military academy in known space. The 1-minute war, they called it. And humanity's reputation changed forever. Before Kethric 7, humans were seen as naive newcomers, primitives with crude technology and simple minds, species to be tolerated and taught. After Kethric 7, humans were seen as something else entirely. Dangerous, capable, ruthless when necessary, but also restrained, careful, precise. Warriors who chose peace but remembered war. The Galactic Council called an emergency session 3 weeks after the battle. The debate was fierce. Some council members argued that humanity had violated the principles of civilized warfare, that their tactics were barbaric and should be condemned. Others argued that humanity had accomplished exactly what the council had failed to do for 80 years. They had ended a war, they had saved millions of lives, and they had done it without conquering territory or demanding tribute. Matriarch Zelves spoke to the council, her voice carrying across the chamber. "I called for help and humanity answered. They came with 6 ships to face 3,000. They could have refused. They could have failed. Instead, they succeeded. 40 million of my people live because Admiral Chen Wei made hard choices." She paused, looking at each council member. "You want to condemn them for their methods? Fine. But remember this. When your people need help, when your civilians are dying, when you call for aid, would you want them to refuse because you once called them barbaric?" The debate continued for hours. Finally, a vote was called. The motion to censure humanity for their tactics failed. The motion to commend humanity for their humanitarian intervention passed. And a new motion was raised, one that changed the galaxy forever. From this day forward, the Terran Defense Fleet would be authorized to act as peacekeepers in Council space. When conflicts threatened civilian lives, humanity could intervene. It passed unanimously. Admiral Chen Wei learned about the vote while the Indomitable was still 3 days from Earth. She stood on the observation deck looking at the stars, thinking about what it meant. Humanity had come to the stars hoping to explore, to learn, to make friends. Instead, they had become the galaxy's enforcers, the ones you called when peace needed to be made by force. Commander Morrison found her there. "Penny, for your thoughts?" "I'm wondering if we did the right thing," Chen said. "Not the battle. That was necessary, but we showed them what we're capable of. We showed them that humans know how to wage total war. What happens when some civilization decides to test that?" Morrison considered it. Then they learned the same lesson the Velk and Quinn learned. That humanity really doesn't want to fight. But if you force us to, we're terrifyingly good at it. Chen smiled without humor. Deterrence through superior capability. It's kept Earth peaceful for 40 years. Maybe it'll work for the galaxy too. They stood together, watching the stars, thinking about the future humanity had just created. Behind them, the crew of the Indomitable continued their duties. They were heroes now, whether they wanted to be or not. They were the people who had ended an 80-year war in 60 seconds. And they carried the weight of that accomplishment, along with the memory of 37 names. 37 people who had died so that 40 million could live. That was the price of peace. That was the burden of power. And that was the lesson humanity had learned long ago on Earth. Sometimes the only way to stop a war is to be better at fighting it than anyone else. The galaxy was learning that lesson now. 3 months after the Battle of Kethric 7, the war ended, not with a climactic final battle, not with a grand surrender ceremony. It ended with a quiet meeting in a conference room aboard the Indomitable, orbiting a neutral world halfway between the territories of the three powers. Matriarch Zelves represented the Thorian Confederacy. Commander Sarvix came for the Velk Empire. A delegation of Quinn, their crystalline bodies pulsing with soft light, spoke for the collective. Admiral Chen Wei sat at the head of the table, not as a participant but as a witness. A reminder of what would happen if the peace talks failed. The negotiations took 3 days. Old grudges came up. Ancient territorial disputes. Economic grievances that went back decades. But every time the talks threatened to break down, every time someone reached for their weapon console, they remembered. They remembered 60 seconds. They remembered what humanity could do when peace failed. The treaty was signed on the 3rd day. The Calvex sector would be demilitarized. Trade routes would be shared. The three powers would establish a joint council to resolve future disputes. It wasn't perfect. Old hatreds don't disappear overnight. But it was peace. Real peace for the first time in 80 years. Admiral Chen watched the signing ceremony and felt no triumph. Only exhaustion. And the weight of 37 names that she carried with her every day. After the ceremony, Matriarch Zelves approached her privately. Admiral Chen, I wanted to thank you again. Not just for saving my people, but for forcing us to stop fighting. Chen nodded politely. I hope the peace holds, Matriarch. So do I, but I must ask you something. Zelves leaned closer. You demonstrated something at Kethric 7. You showed us that humanity understands warfare at a level we had forgotten. But you also showed restraint. You stopped when you could have continued. Why? Chen was quiet for a moment. Because destruction is easy, Matriarch. Any fool with a weapon can destroy. The hard part is knowing when to stop. Knowing when enough is enough. Is that a human philosophy? It's a lesson we learned the hard way. We spent 10,000 years destroying each other. We got very good at it. Too good. We nearly ended our own species 3 times. Chen's voice was heavy, so we made a choice. We decided that just because we could destroy something didn't mean we should. We decided that true strength is using just enough force to achieve your goal, then stopping. Zelves clicked thoughtfully. You came to the stars hoping to never use those lessons again. Yes, but we brought them with us, just in case. Chen smiled sadly. This was the just in case. Back on Earth, humanity was dealing with its new reputation. The Battle of Kethric 7 was analyzed endlessly. News programs showed the footage over and over. Military analysts broke down every second of the engagement. Politicians debated what it meant for Earth's role in galactic affairs. Some people were proud. Humanity had proven it could stand with the great powers of the galaxy. They had saved lives and ended a war. Others were concerned. They worried about what would happen when other conflicts arose. Would humanity be expected to intervene every time? Would Earth's children be sent to die in alien wars? Admiral Chen was called to testify before the United Earth Assembly. She stood before the representatives of every nation and region on the planet and answered their questions. Admiral Chen, said the representative from the Asian Coalition, you accomplished an incredible military victory. But you also revealed to the galaxy that humanity knows how to wage total war. Some people worry this makes us a target. What do you say to those concerns? Chen chose her words carefully. I say they're right to worry. We are a target now, not because we're weak, but because we're strong. Strong in ways that other species haven't seen in thousands of years. She paused. But being strong and being aggressive are not the same thing. We showed the galaxy what we can do. Now we have to show them what we choose not to do. And what's that? Asked the representative from the African Union. We choose not to conquer. We choose not to dominate. We choose not to use our capabilities unless absolutely necessary. Chen's voice was firm. Humanity learned something important in our history. Military power without restraint leads to destruction. True power is having the capability to destroy and choosing not to. The representative from the European Federation spoke next. You're saying we should be the galaxy's peacekeepers? I'm saying the galaxy has given us that role whether we want it or not. After Ketheric 7, when conflicts arise, people will look to humanity. They'll wonder if we'll intervene. That gives us influence. That gives us power. Chen looked at the assembly. The question is, what do we do with that power? The debate in the assembly went on for weeks. Finally, they reached a decision. Earth would accept the role of peacekeeper, but with strict conditions. Humanity would only intervene when civilian lives were at risk. Only when invited by legitimate authorities. Only when peaceful solutions had failed. They called it the Chen Doctrine, though the Admiral herself protested the name, Fleet Admiral Chen Wei. She had been promoted after Ketheric 7, given command of Earth's entire military. It was an honor she hadn't wanted but couldn't refuse. Her first act as Fleet Admiral was to visit the families of the 37 people who had died at Ketheric 7. She went to each home personally. She sat with parents who had lost children, with partners who had lost their loves, with children who had lost parents. She told them exactly what had happened. She told them why their loved ones had died. She told them that it mattered. The family of Captain Maria Rodriguez, who had gone down with the Mercury, invited Chen to dinner. Rodriguez's husband, David, and their 2 teenage children sat with Chen in their small apartment in Buenos Aires. She volunteered, David said quietly. Maria always said that if the mission needed someone, she would go. That was who she was, Chen nodded. She saved millions of lives. The Mercury's run broke the Quinn Formation. Without that, the entire operation would have failed. Rodriguez's daughter, Sophia, asked the question that Chen dreaded. Was it worth it? Was saving those aliens worth my mom's life? Chen didn't look away. She met the girl's eyes directly. I don't know if I can answer that in a way that helps. Your mother was worth everything. Every life is, but she believed that saving other lives was worth the risk. She made that choice freely. Do you think she made the right choice? Sophia asked. I think she made the brave choice, and I think 40 million people are alive today because of it. Does that make it worth it? That's something you'll have to decide for yourself. They talked for hours. Chen answered every question. She shared stories about Captain Rodriguez that the family hadn't heard. She promised to establish a memorial fund in Rodriguez's name. When she left, David walked her to the door. Thank you for coming, Admiral. It means something that you took the time. It's the least I could do, Chen said. I gave the orders. I carry the responsibility. You carry the weight well, David said. Maria would have appreciated that. Chen repeated this visit 37 times. It took 3 months. It was the hardest thing she had ever done, but it was also the most important. Across the galaxy, the impact of Ketheric 7 continued to spread. Military academies from dozens of species studied the battle. They called it the 1-minute war, and it became required learning for any tactical officer. The lessons were clear. Humans compartmentalize warfare. They separate civilian from military targets. Humans use their environment as a weapon. They don't just fight in space, they fight with space. Humans study their enemies and exploit weakness without mercy or hesitation. Humans plan for exact outcomes, not extended campaigns. But the most important lesson was this. Humans remember. They carry the knowledge of 10,000 years of warfare, and they will use it if forced. The political impact was just as significant. When border disputes arose, when trade conflicts heated up, when old grudges threatened to explode into violence, someone would always say, "Do we really want the humans to solve this for us?" It became a shorthand for asking whether people wanted outside intervention, whether they wanted their war to end in 60 seconds. Usually the answer was no, which meant they found peaceful solutions instead. Humanity became the galaxy's referee, not because they wanted the role, but because everyone else was afraid of what would happen if they forced humanity to intervene. It was deterrence on a galactic scale. Commander Sarvix of the Velk Empire had spent 3 months studying humanity. He read their history, he watched their entertainment. He tried to understand how a species could be so contradictory. Humans created beautiful art and terrible weapons. They wrote poetry about love and tactical manuals about efficient killing. They built cities of glass and steel, then practiced urban warfare techniques for destroying those same cities. Finally, he decided to visit Earth himself. He arrived on a diplomatic visa with a small security detail. He toured the capital. He met with government officials. He saw the museums and monuments, and then he asked to visit a specific place. The Memorial Garden sat in the center of Geneva, where the United Earth government was headquartered. It was a peaceful place with trees and flowers and quiet paths. In the center stood a monument, 37 names carved in stone, the crew of the Mercury and the 14 pilots who had died at Kethric 7. Commander Sarvix stood before the monument for a long time. His security detail waited at a respectful distance. Fleet Admiral Chen found him there. She had heard about his visit and guessed where he would go. "Commander," she said politely. "Admiral." Sarvix didn't look away from the monument. "I wanted to see this. To understand." "Understand what?" "How you can be so deadly and so careful at the same time. How you can destroy my fleet in 60 seconds and then mourn your own losses so deeply." Chen stood beside him, looking at the names. Names she knew by heart. "Because they're not contradictory, Commander. They're connected. We're deadly because we know the cost. We're careful because we've paid it too many times." "I don't understand humans," Sarvix admitted. "Most humans don't understand humans either," Chen said with a slight smile. "We're complicated. We can be the best and worst of things sometimes at the same time." Sarvix finally turned to face her. "I came to Earth to learn if you're a threat to the Velk Empire. To determine if we should build defenses against you, form alliances to counter your power. And what have you decided? That you're the most dangerous species in the galaxy. And the safest." Sarvix gestured to the monument. "You're dangerous because you know how to wage total war. You're safe because you choose not to. You're dangerous because you're ruthless. You're safe because you're restrained." "We're just trying to do the right thing," Chen said. "We don't always succeed, but we try." "That's what makes you terrifying," Sarvix said. "You actually mean it." He left Earth the next day, his report to the Velk Empire simple. Do not provoke humanity. Do not test their patience. Do not make them choose war. A year after Kethric 7, the Galactic Council held a ceremony to honor the human fleet that had ended the war. Fleet Admiral Chen attended with the survivors of the battle. The crew of the Indomitable and its escort vessels stood at attention as speakers from across the galaxy praised their actions. Matriarch Zelves spoke about the 40 million lives saved. A Quinn representative acknowledged that humanity had taught them a valuable lesson about humility. Even Commander Sarvix grudgingly admitted that humanity had accomplished something remarkable. But Chen's mind was elsewhere. She thought about Captain Rodriguez going down with her ship, about the 14 pilots who had flown into the minefield knowing some wouldn't return, about the 37 names carved in stone back on Earth. When it was her turn to speak, Chen kept it brief. "We did what we had to do. We don't celebrate it. We honor those who died making it possible, and we hope we never have to do it again." The ceremony ended. Dignitaries returned to their ships. Life went on. That evening, Chen stood on the observation deck of the Indomitable looking at the stars. Lieutenant Commander Okonkwo found her there. "You okay, Admiral?" "Just thinking," Chen said. "A year ago we were unknowns. The primitive humans who barely knew how to travel between stars. Now we're the species everyone fears and respects. Does it bother you?" "Sometimes. I came to space to explore, to see new things, to meet alien species and learn from them." Chen smiled sadly. "Instead, I showed them how to kill efficiently." "You showed them how to stop killing," Okonkwo corrected. "The war is over. The sector is at peace. Millions of people are alive who would be dead. At the cost of 37 of our own. Yes, and we carry that. We remember them. That's what separates us from the monsters, Admiral. Monsters don't care about the cost. We do." Chen thought about that. About the families she had visited. About the memorial garden. About the weight she carried every single day. "Do you think we did the right thing?" she asked. "I think we did the necessary thing." And we did it with as much restraint as possible. We could have destroyed all 3 fleets. We chose not to. That matters, does it? We still killed thousands, yes, and saved millions. Both things are true. Both things will always be true. Okonkwo looked at the stars. That's the burden of power, Admiral. You don't get clean choices. You get necessary choices, and you live with them. They stood in silence, watching the galaxy turn. Somewhere out there, people lived in peace because of what humanity had done. Children grew up safe. Families stayed together. Wars that might have started never did, because people remembered what happened when humans intervened. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was something. Fleet Admiral Chen Wei returned to her quarters and wrote her daily log entry. She did this every night, recording her thoughts for history. 1 year since Kethric 7, she wrote, "The galaxy sees us differently now. They respect our power. They fear our capabilities. They appreciate our restraint." She paused, thinking about what to write next. But the most important thing we showed them is this. Humanity came to the stars hoping to never use the lessons we learned on Earth. We wanted to explore, to learn, to grow. We didn't want to be warriors. But when we had to be, we were the best warriors the galaxy had seen in millennia. Not because we're stronger or smarter or better equipped, but because we remember. We remember every mistake, every innovation, every tactic that worked and every strategy that failed. We remember 10,000 years of warfare, and we carry that knowledge with us, hoping never to use it again. But ready to use it if we must. Chen closed the log and looked at the photo she kept on her desk. The crew of the Mercury. 23 faces smiling for the camera before their final mission. She touched the frame gently. "You made it matter," she whispered. "I promise you that." In the years that followed, humanity's reputation as peacekeepers grew. 3 more times Chen led fleets into conflict zones. 3 more times the mere presence of human ships convinced combatants to negotiate rather than fight. Earth built more ships, trained more crews, prepared for conflicts they hoped would never come. And across the galaxy, in military academies and government chambers, in peace negotiations and treaty discussions, people remembered the lesson of Kethric 7, that humanity was the species that knew how to wage total war, but chose not to. That they were the warriors who preferred peace. That they were the ones you called when you needed help, and the ones you never wanted to provoke. That in 60 seconds they had changed the galaxy forever, and that sometimes the best way to ensure peace is to be really, really good at war.